All right, let's jump right in. The whole point of this is to give you a richer, smarter way to talk about how we think. The guy behind all this, Nobel laureate Daniel Kahneman, he had this great idea. He wanted to improve our water cooler gossip, to help us all get better at noticing the weird, wonderful, and often flawed ways our own minds operate. So let's get into it. So take a look at this woman. You don't have to think about it, do you? You just know she's angry, instantly. You probably even get a sense that she's about to say something less than kind. This wasn't a choice. It wasn't something you decided to do. It just happened to you. This is a perfect example of what we call fast thinking. Okay, now what about this? Your brain immediately recognizes it's a multiplication problem, right? But the answer? Yeah, that doesn't just pop into your head. To get it, you actually have to stop, pull up some mental software, and walk through the steps. It's actual work. It's effortful. It's deliberate. This is the absolute definition of slow thinking. So, these two ways of thinking are basically the two main characters running the show inside your head. We're going to call them System 1 and System 2. Think of System 1 as the hero of our story. It's fast, it's intuitive, it's automatic, and it's doing almost everything behind the scenes. And then there's System 2. It's kind of the lazy sidekick. It's the one that handles the heavy lifting, the tough, analytical stuff, but you have to force it to get to work. And honestly, it would much rather just chill out. So here's where we're headed. First, we're going to get to know our automatic hero, System 1, the one who's really in charge. Then, we're going to look at its predictable and sometimes pretty serious flaws. After that, we'll get into this wild idea of the two different selves that are duking it out inside you. And finally, we'll tie it all together and see why any of this actually matters in your day-to-day life. So let's start with the star of the show, System 1. You might not realize it, but almost everything you think and do, your first impressions, your gut feelings, so many of your choices, they're all cooked up automatically by this incredibly powerful system. Okay, just look at this word for a second. All right, you just saw the word eat. Now quick, what's the first word that pops into your head right here? I'm willing to bet it was soup. Now, it could have been soap, right? But it wasn't. Why? Because your brain was just primed with the whole idea of eating. This little trick is called priming, and it's one of System 1's superpowers. The idea of eat just lit up this whole web of connected ideas in your brain. Things like food, hungry, fork, and yeah, soup. It made you way more likely to see the word one way over another. And the craziest part? It happens completely automatically. You didn't even notice. But, and this is a big but, there's a catch. System 1's incredible speed comes at a price. It loves to take shortcuts, and those shortcuts lead to systematic, totally predictable mistakes. Let's take a look at some of these glitches in the machine. Now, this is fascinating. I can tell you, and you can grab a ruler and prove it, that these two horizontal lines are exactly the same length. But even knowing that, you still can't help but see the bottom one as being longer. Your conscious brain, your System 2, knows the truth, but it's powerless to switch off System 1's automatic impression. It's still going to see it wrong. And that tells us something really profound. Just like our eyes can be tricked by visual illusions, our minds can be tricked by illusions of thought. We call these cognitive biases. They aren't random mistakes. They're predictable patterns of misjudgment that are literally built into how we think. Let's try one out. Just go with your gut. Which one of these do you think kills more people in the US every year? Stroke, or all kinds of accidents combined? The answer? It's stroke, and it's not even close. So why do most of us guess accidents? Well, because accidents make for dramatic headlines. They're vivid, they stick in our memory, they get our emotions going. And that makes them feel way more common than they actually are, because they are more mentally available. Our System 1 jumps to the wrong conclusion. That's a classic bias called the availability heuristic. Kahneman tells this amazing story about an Israeli Air Force instructor who was absolutely convinced that yelling at his cadets worked better than praising them. And he had proof. He'd scream at a pilot for a clumsy maneuver, and boom, the next one was usually better. He'd praise a pilot for a perfect landing, and wouldn't you know it, the next one was usually worse. But the instructor was totally wrong. He was being tricked by a cognitive illusion called regression to the mean. Think about it. An incredibly good or an incredibly bad performance is, well, an exception. The very next try is just statistically way more likely to be closer to their normal, average performance, no matter what you do. He had created this perfect cause and effect story for what was just random chance. And a lot of these biases come from one giant glitch. System 1 is a master storyteller. It takes whatever bits and pieces of information it has, no matter how flimsy, and weaves them into the most coherent story it can. It never stops to ask, hey, what information am I missing here? It just works with what's right in front of it. Kahneman came up with this brilliant, unforgettable acronym for it, YZT. What you see is all there is. It's the engine driving our gut feelings and our overconfidence. Okay, let's get to our last big idea, and trust me, this one's a bit of a mindbender. It turns out that there's this weird conflict going on inside our heads between two different selves, the self that actually lives through our experiences and the self that tells stories about them afterward. A famous experiment shows this perfectly. Imagine this. Participants stick their hand in painfully cold water for exactly 60 seconds. Then, in a second trial, they do that same painful 60 seconds, but then they have to keep their hand in for another 30 seconds while the water is made just a tiny bit warmer, but still very unpleasant. Now, logically, the second trial is way worse, right? It has all the pain of the first one plus more. But when they were asked which one they'd rather repeat, an absolutely staggering 80% of people chose to repeat the longer, more painful trial. What? Why on earth would anyone choose more pain? Well, it all comes down to how our memory works. It doesn't add up the total amount of pain. It pretty much just remembers the average of the worst moment and how it felt right at the end. And since the longer trial ended on a slightly less painful note, it was remembered as the better experience. This experiment perfectly reveals our two selves. You have the experiencing self, the one that lives life from moment to moment asking, does it hurt now? But you also have the remembering self. That's the storyteller. It's the one who looks back and asks, how was it on the whole? And here's the kicker. The remembering self is the one that makes all the decisions. We live in a kind of tyranny of the remembering self. The storyteller is in charge, even though its stories are often a terrible summary of what we actually went through. So, after all that, why does any of this matter? What's the point of knowing about these characters and glitches inside our own heads? How does it actually help us think better? Okay, let's wrap this up. Your mind has two systems, the fast, automatic hero and the slow, lazy sidekick. Your intuition is amazing, but it uses shortcuts that can and will lead you into predictable traps. We leap to conclusions based on what you see is all there is, and the story your memory tells you about something can be wildly different from what you actually experienced. But the real power here isn't just knowing these facts, it's having the vocabulary. It lets you diagnose bad thinking both in yourself and in others. And you can use this stuff like today. At work, instead of just saying, wow, that speaker was amazing, you might think, I wonder if we're just impressed because he seemed so confident. Is that the halo effect? In your own life, you can catch yourself making a snap judgment and ask, wait, is this just WSIAT? What am I not seeing here? You can finally understand why that miserable vacation with the one fantastic last day is remembered so fondly. And maybe, just maybe, you can start making choices that are good for both the you living in the moment and the you that has to live with the memories. So I'm going to leave you with this question to chew on. Now that you've been properly introduced to the two characters running your mind, the brilliant but flawed hero and its lazy controller, can you ever really, truly, 100% trust your gut again?